Hello, everyone.
Good afternoon, Paul.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. It's about 3:30. Let me go ahead on and call the Coronavirus Ad Hoc Committee meeting to order. Ms. Only, are you online?
Yes, sir.
Can you call the roll for members present?
Yes, sir. McBride,
Present.
Livingston,
Present.
Joe Walker, Barron,
Here.
and Newton.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the approval of minutes for July 28th. Can I entertain a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move for approval of minutes for July 28th, 2020.
Motion for approval, is there a second?
Second.
It's moving properly second. Any discussion, change, deletions regarding the minutes for July 28th?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Newton, you're recognized.
thank you. For my information, I have the agenda, but not the minutes. How are those sent out?
I'm sorry, what's the question again about the minutes?
I don't have them, so I have the agenda for today's meeting, but not the minutes, and just wondered how those were sent out.
Let me check with Ms. Only.
Mine is attached to the agenda.
Yeah, they were emailed out Wednesday morning.
And we can defer them if you prefer, though, until you get to see them.
No, you all can approve them. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further discussion regarding the minutes? If not, it's a moving properly second. Ms. Owen, can you call the roll for the motion to approve the minutes?
Yes, sir. McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Joe Walker, Barron,
Yes.
Newton. Motion passes.
Thank you. That brings us to the adoption of the agenda.
I move for adoption of the agenda.
There's a motion for adoption of the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
It's moving properly second for the adoption of the agenda. Mr. Brown, anything did we change on the agenda, add, delete, whatever?
No, Mr. Chair, the staff does not have any requests to change the agenda.
Okay. Chair, Ms. Ong, can you call the roll for the motion for the adoption of the agenda? Ms. Only?
Okay. McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Joe Walker, Barron,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The next item is the election of the chair. The floor is now open for election of the chair for the Corona Ad Hoc Advisory Committee.
Mr. Chair,
Ad Hoc Committee, sorry. Mrs. McBride, you recognize.
I would like to nominate Councilwoman Gretchen Barron. And I would like to say that she's done an excellent job thus far in terms of promoting the coronavirus pandemic and the programs that she's put in place.
Thank you. It's been moved. Is there a second for the nomination for Ms. Barron? I'll second that nomination then. Any further nominations? It's a motion to bring nomination to close for the election of chair.
Mr. Chair, I move for the nomination to come to close.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's moved and properly second. Ms. Owen, can you call the roll for the nomination of Mrs. Barron for chair of the Corona Ad Hoc Committee?
Yes, sir. McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Joe Walker, Barron,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Miss Barron, number two things happen. It's your choice. The new chair can take over now. I can just finish up the meeting since I've kind of had some discussion about some of the things. Or do you want to take over now?
Please proceed, but if I may make a brief statement.
Yes.
I'd just like to thank my colleagues for entrusting me to lead this committee. As Ms. McBride said, I came onto council excited about being willing to serve, and then also seeing the need for what some areas that we can connect in Richland County to ensure that our citizens have the services and the opportunities as it's presented during this global pandemic. So thank you all again, and Mr. Livingston, thank you for leading the remainder of this meeting.
Quite well. Mr. Brown, that brings us to item 5 on our agenda regarding the emergency rental assistance program. I'm trying to put up my presentation you had on that.
Yes, sir. So we're going to actually ask our Assistant Director of Emergency Services, as well as our local disaster recovery manager, Mike King, to present a presentation to the council. As you have mentioned, Mr. Chair, this is related to the emergency rental assistance program. You probably heard a lot about that. And we want to talk to you about that and try to get a framework established so which we can work from, give the council some indication of how we might move this thing forward so that our local citizens can have access to this program. So with that being said, Mr. King, I want to turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you and good afternoon, all committee members. My name is Mike King. As Administrator Brown said, I'm the Assistant Director of Richland County Emergency Services. I also serve in the capacity of Richland County Local Disaster Recovery Manager. If I may be allowed, I'll go ahead and share the PowerPoint presentation with everyone.
Thank you, but I can't find mine. Appreciate it.
Please let me know if you can see it.
We can see
Yes.
it.
Great, thank you. Well, this afternoon, it's really my pleasure and privilege to discuss with the committee our newest opportunity to help our citizens with some additional relief that are facing really some significant problems related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And specifically, what I'd like to talk about is the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. To give you a little background, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program is a part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act, which was actually passed by Congress on December 21st and signed into law by the President December 27th. It provided overall about $900 billion in COVID-19 relief funds, $25 billion, which has been made available directly to the states, U.S. territories, local governments, and tribal communities. These funds are specifically allocated to assist households that are unable to pay rent and utilities due to COVID pandemic issues. Grantees, and again, Richland County is a grantee, we may use existing or newly created rental assistance programs. Now, in the case of Richland County, we did not have any previous rental assistance programs funded through the CARES Act or either of the stimulus package. So we really are building this program from the ground up. We had 3 guiding principles that's leading us through this entire principle of development of this program. That is fairness, equity, transparency. And it's important for everyone to know that this program is designed to benefit all of Richland County, whether you live within a municipality or you don't live within the municipality. Every eligible Richland County resident will have the opportunity to apply for this program. A little bit more about the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. The U.S. Treasury was to disperse the funds within 30 days of when the act was signed into law. They did so. Richland County applied directly to the Treasury for a direct allocation. We were awarded $12,573,547.20, and that was awarded to us on January 20th of this year. We've been working diligently since that time to put the plan together to make sure this money is allocated properly. We've got a couple really critical timelines we need to be aware of with this program. This is a very fast-paced program. Treasury wants the money spent quickly, wants to get the aid into the hands of those who need it as fast as possible. So the first deadline is December 31st of 2021. That is when the initial program will expire. All funds will expire that time if they haven't been expended. What is of special interest to us, though, is also the date of September 30th of 2021. That is the end of the fiscal year for the federal government. At that time, the Treasury Department, the federal government Treasury Department, is going to go back and look at all the grantees that have been allocated funds. What the Treasury Department is telling everybody right now is they're going to look at those funds. They're going to see who has what they call been slow spenders or quick spenders. Anybody who has spent less than 65% of those funds, the Treasury Department is going to withdraw those allocations and they're going to move those allocations to the quick spenders. Well, obviously we want to be a quick spender because that's going to give us more funds to assist people. Plus, if you're considered one of the quick spenders, you will be given an additional 90 days timeline to complete the program. So you'll go to March 31st of 2022. Looking at the program itself, the maximum assistance to eligible households is 12 months of assistance. Now, we do have the option to extend that additional 3 months. However, that's going to be conditional on fundings and priorities. And we have to take care of the initial priorities first. And then if there is additional funding and there is a demonstrated need for housing stability on a case-by-case basis, we can approve an additional 3 months. Who's eligible? Well, first off, this is a renter program. I know we've heard a lot about the South Carolina housing program, that was a mortgage and rental program through HUD. This is a rental program, and a utility assistance program through the Treasury Department. The key basic eligibility rules for this program is, first, the household income cannot be more than 80% of the area median income. The area median income as determined by HUD, and they publish that for Richland County. Eligible household cannot be more than 80% of that. So it has to be considered low income. Second, you have to have one or more household members who can demonstrate they've had a risk or they have a risk of experiencing homelessness or housing instability. And then the third gateway is you have to have one or more household member who qualifies for unemployment or has experienced financial hardship directly or indirectly due to the pandemic.
Can you give us some example? What qualifies? Are you going to get to that in terms of a hardship, or how do we verify that?
Well, what Treasury requires is basically it's in the eye of the beholder. And what that means is they're going to be very, very lenient with that. And basically, they're requiring that the applicant attest to a hardship and provides an example of that hardship. And again, Treasury is going to be very flexible and very lenient on this, as long as the applicant can show it's directly related to the pandemic or indirectly related to the pandemic, which there's going to be a wide area that we can approve based on that. Again, it has to be attested to by the applicant under penalty of law that they did face a hardship. Treasury's putting the onus on the applicant to be able to provide that information. But again, there's no hard and set fast rules of what that is. We plan to be as lenient as possible moving forward with that, as long as we have a self-certification from the applicant.
Mr. Chair.
You recognize?
Thank you. While you're looking at your eligibility with the 50% of AMI, can you tell me what income level that equates to more or less in Richland County?
Yes, if you look at our policy and procedure manual, we actually listed that in the policy and procedure manual. It's taken directly from HUD. And it shows the number of members in the household and what the income is. And it shows you low and very low income, what the AMI, the area median income, and then low income and very low income.
Mr. Chair,
You recognize, Mr. Mayor?
to Ms. Newton's point, Ms. Newton, it's on page 9.
Thank you.
And then once the individuals meet the basic eligibility requirements, they're going to be prioritized even further. The statute requires that households with incomes of no more than 50% of AMI, which is considered very low income, be given priority. And also to take a look at households in which one or more member is unemployed and has been unemployed for 90 days. They consider that extended unemployment. They want those households to be provided priority on the funding. Also, we're going to really focus our funding on housing related arrears. This is where our residents are really facing the risk of eviction and or utility shutoff because they're so far in arrears. So we want to make sure we get this money paid so their arrears are taken care of, so they aren't facing that immediate threat of eviction. The thing about this program is we can take their arrears back to March 20th is when the presidential declaration, March 20th of last year. So we can make up for a lot of their arrears if they so have that need. What's really unusual about this
Let me
program.
ask another question for clarification. I'm sorry. Let me interrupt you, but I know I'll lose my questions. Would the funding be paid to the individual or to the tenant, the landlord? Or?
Actually, it can be both. Now, probably the lion's share of the program and the largest amount of the payments will be directly to landlords and or utilities.
Yeah, that's what many of the programs are, yes, okay.
Yes. Now, this program does provide that if the landlord, and I don't know why the landlord would choose to do this, but the landlord chooses not to participate, we are authorized to make payments to the individual resident for their arrears and or prospective rental.
That makes sense.
And again, that's what's kind of unusual about this is that the landlords, and we'll talk about this a little bit further, but the landlords can actually apply on behalf of their tenants. And one of the things that we're really being held to task here for due diligence is part of the evaluation and process is going to be making sure there's not duplication of benefits. In other words, one of the things we have to do in the review process is to make sure this money is not being paid twice by federal government if there's other federal programs. So that's going to be part of our investigative and evaluation process. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, as far as income calculation, the statute allows us to look at it two different ways. The easiest and best way is if we can look at the applicant's total income for the prior calendar year 2020, 1040 W-2s and things like that. We can look at their previous income for 2020. We don't have to look at their current income. If we can't do that, or the applicant chooses not to do that for whatever reason, we can also take an application based on the applicant's monthly income at the time of the application. The problem with that is we will only allow them 3 months of assistance, and then we have to reevaluate that income every 3 months. How do we do that? Well, one of the things is each applicant will have an individual file. We'll have a follow-up in that file, about a 2 to 2.5 month period. It'll pop up. Our caseworker will get a hold of the applicant, make sure they're still good to go, make sure they still need the money, and make sure they're still re-qualified as eligible every 3 months until they meet the maximum. Again, we can assist up to 12 months with additional 3 months based on funding and housing stability needs. Treasury allows one other proof of income, I guess, is if an applicant cannot provide proof of income, documentation income, it's not verifiable. They make a claim that the income is not verifiable due to an impact of COVID. They can attest to their income. And some of the examples Treasurer gave is the place of employment closed. They were paid in cash, or they have no qualifying income. If that's the case, they can still apply. They still can qualify. But again, we'll have to requalify their income every 3 months during this entire process. So it's kind of unique that the applicant through attestation can attest that they have this income and not require as stringent a documentation as most programs require.
One question, Mr. Chair.
Ms. McBride.
Mr. King, so far, thank you. I'm so happy to hear policy that's actually trying to help without so much paperwork, because in the past, this has not been the procedures that were taken. So I would just want to say that I'm real pleased about that. Now, for the money is going to basically to the owners of the applicants, residents, right, to the renters, rather than to the renter. It's going to, so the question is, what about when there's substantial housing and because the renters were not able to pay, these property owners did not repair or provide repairs? Is anything in the landlords rather, is anything in this package that address that?
No, I'm sorry, can you still hear me?
Yes.
No, the law doesn't address that at all. We're trying to mirror or reflect the law as closely as possible.
Okay.
However, if you take a look at the page that we have up right now, is one thing is these landlords who are going to be applying on behalf of the tenant. First off, they must notify the tenant. Secondly, they must obtain written consent from the tenant. And to your question, that would probably be an issue then with the tenant saying, look, I'm not going to really give you, I'm not going to give you written permission unless, I get whatever's done correctly that needs to be done. But no, we have no enforcement power at all to enforce repairs being made and things being made right. The only thing we have the ability to do is catch up the arrears and also provide on a case-by-case basis some prospective rental assistance to individual applicants.
Okay, and the final question, is there a maximum amount that a landlord can receive?
No, ma'am. It has to be, but it has to be the amount that's agreed to and documented on the lease up to 12 months.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Ms. Barron?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I wanted to go back to, it appeared that perhaps there's going to be a checklist of some sort that would verify if the landlord has gotten other funds, or if an applicant has gotten other funds, to eliminate double dipping, if you allow me to say that. Is that what I heard you say?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, we'll have caseworkers they'll be assigned to each case, and that's part of their job, is as much as humanly possible to provide due diligence to try to run down. We'll be checking through other agencies, federal agencies and things like that, to make sure there was not a duplication of benefits. And also the applicant has to attest and certify that they did not receive any duplication of benefits. And we make it very clear, this is under penalty of federal law. If they lie, then they're going to be facing potential significant penalties from the Treasury Department.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one more question, please.
Go ahead, please.
And my next question would be, as the caseworkers are making contact with the applicants to recertify or requalify them, how is this contact being made? Will they have appointments? Is it via mail, telephone calls? How will they recertify? Well,
obviously telephone would be the quickest, and email would be the second quickest. But again, they will try to make as personal contact as possible, develop a relationship with the applicant. And again, it'll really be up to the applicant how they prefer to be contacted. And then there'll be appointments made. And we'll talk about a little bit more about that in the flow as we go through the process. But it will really be up to the applicant how they choose to be recontacted. But what we're going to do is make sure, because people get busy, people forget, we're going to make sure that we have it in our file at the 2.5 month period that we start reaching out to that applicant. Even though Treasury puts the onus on the applicant, we want to make sure we're doing everything and full due diligence to make sure we're doing everything to assist that applicant.
Very good.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Newton, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to wait to ask this, but since you're talking about the we, are you going to address who is going to be handling and administering this program and how we're going to make sure we're adequately staffed to make these things happen quickly?
I can a little bit, but I'd actually want to defer to Assistant County Administrator Ashley Powell on that. We've had some discussions, but right now my responsibility is put the program together. And yes, we're going to need assistance. Richland County does not have the capacity. We don't have the personnel to do this. This program provides for administrative funding for a professional agency to assist us. And if you look at some of the lessons learned, and we're talking to a lot of people around the country right now putting these programs together, and the lion's share by far is everybody needs help, and they're going to use that 10% of the funding to get help. But the biggest thing is capacity. If you look at the South Carolina housing program, which is a very good program, they were literally inundated within the first day and had to shut down the program within the first day. We want to do everything humanly possible to prevent that. We want to make sure if someone calls in, they can talk to someone. We want to make sure if they file an application, they can do so. In fact, we anticipate such a large influx, and that was kind of supported today when we saw that South Carolina Housing has now closed their program within 6 days because of the number of applications. So this is going to be a super popular program. We want to make sure everybody that wants to apply can apply, but we got to make sure we have that capacity there. The people that are trained properly to do the investigation, to people that are trained properly and make sure that all the reporting requirements are there for the treasurer, because there are a lot of reporting requirements.
Well, what I will do, because I have several other questions, is I'll hold the rest of my questions to the end, but be aware that's going to be one of those questions. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, can we let him finish the slide presentation before we ask any other questions and then hold it to the end?
Yeah, we'll do that. We just got, so excited about it, but I agree that helps. Go ahead, Ms. King.
Thank you, sir. And again, as we're saying, if a landlord's going to do it, and we anticipate a lot of landlords, we've already had a lot of calls from management companies and property owner companies. So we anticipate a lot of landlords are going to be applying, as well as utilities. Richland County utilities is an example, City of Columbia utilities, and then of course private utilities such as Dominion and things like that. There's going to be a lot of applications that we're going to, again, going back to capacity, we're going to be having a lot of applications be filed by a lot of folks that we got to make sure we handle those properly. Documentation, some of the things that we're required to document is we have to show the tenant's inability to pay, again, due to the financial hardship resulting directly or indirectly from the COVID. We have to show the tenant does not have sufficient income or resources to pay. We have to show, again, duplication of benefits that they did not receive source of the funding from a same assistance. And again, the tenant household income is no more than 80% AMI with the priority of 50% or under, household where one member has been unemployed for at least 90 days, or households with housing related arrears that could result in evictions. Again, we need to provide income, proof of job loss or unemployment for 90 days, evidence of that lease. That's where we get back to what's the maximum. We want to make sure if we have a landlord saying the tenant owes $10,000, we want to have proof of that lease and confirmation from the tenant that yes, that's what my rent is every month. So we want to make sure we're paying the amount that's actually due. Residency verification, we need to make sure that the applicant resides within the geographical, or the household is within the geographical boundaries of Richland County. And then the other issue is very, very big to us on every federal program is personally identifiable information, providing privacy and security of that information. That we want to make sure that all information is used only for the submitting of reports, and that information is maintained on the server of the information system of record. We must make sure that we provide all confidentiality protections, especially for survivors of intimate partner violence, sexual assault, or stalking. So how are we going to do all this? Well, here's the flow. What we did is we took all this information and we said, okay, we want to make sure we have a very comprehensive program, but we also want to make sure that it's efficient and effective. So we broke it down into 3 steps. And I won't bore everybody with every individual step of this process, but if I may just give you an overview. First off is how do folks apply? Well, obviously the website, the web link would be the preference because it's instantaneous. The information is all right there. So if and when this program is approved and if and when we identify the vendor to assist us in this program, managing this program, there's going to be a website developed and prepared. There'll be a web link that will be a direct web link that will be advertised, but also be a link on the county web page that folks can go on there. We're going to promote this, and I don't want to steal Beverly or Chris's thunder on the community outreach and community engagement, but there's going to be a lot of community outreach, a lot of community engagement, getting this information out, how folks can apply, when does it start, how can you apply, what's the process. So the website, the web links is the #1 preference. For those who cannot apply or have access to the internet, we're going to have established a toll-free hotline that folks can call. That hotline. They'll be connected directly to a case manager or a caseworker who is going to be assigned to Richland County, and that caseworker will help walk them through the application process and get their application in. And the other part is something we're very proud of is going to be a very extensive outreach program, and that's where folks can use outreach resources to apply. As an example, we just met with Richland Library this morning. They're going to allow us access to their facilities. And one thing is really cool. I did not know this, but Richland Library actually has mobile hotspots that they can go out to the residents or the applicant who wants to apply, allow them to use the hotspot where they normally would not have internet, and help them get online through the hotspot and apply for this program benefits. They also, and this, I did not know this, they also have social workers that they're going to allow us to use and work with us to help individuals that may have questions, may have issues, concerns, and we're going to be providing in-house training to all their personnel to make sure they're highly trained if someone wants to use the library's benefits to apply for this. We're also, as far as, again, outreach, we're also being contacted by several other public service agencies that want to partner with us to get this information. Once the application is filed, they're going to do a quick review of it. It's going to do a quick QA, QC. If it meets the very basic initial eligibility, it's going to go directly to a case manager at that time. If it does not meet basic eligibility, then what's going to happen is a ineligible letter is going to be prepared. It's going to be sent back to the applicant, but we're also going to follow up from that case manager with a phone call to the applicant. What we're going to try to do is help the applicant understand why they're not eligible, understand if there's anything they can do. There might be something missing or we need additional information to become eligible. But again, looking at other public service agencies, we're also going to try to identify additional assistance they may have outside of our program to help them in their needs. So we want to make sure we do that personal touch, that personal outreach back. If they are eligible, then it's assigned to the case manager. They'll be notified, the applicant will be notified that they have met initial eligibility requirements, and it's going to be moved forward to step 2. Step 2 is the formal eligibility review. And that's where the case manager, caseworker will work one-on-one with the applicant. They're going to look at 4 gateways to final qualifications. That's #1 is their identity is verified. #2, the location of the household is verified. Again, it has to be in the geographical boundaries of Richland County. #3, the household is financially qualified. Again, the 80-50%. #4 is help them ensure there's a COVID tie-in, either directly or indirectly. And then if all 4 of those gateways are passed, then they'll go to conduct a duplication of benefits review. And that's where they get in and They'll find if there's been any other federal assistance. And again, they'll do as much as they humanly possibly can with the applicant understanding their information they're providing is under penalty of law. It has to be truthful under penalty of law. If there's duplication of benefits found, that amount will be subtracted from the benefit being requested through the ERA program. The case manager, caseworker will then look and say, okay, does a duplication of benefit meet or exceed the amount requested? If it doesn't, if the amount they're requesting now exceeds, then they'll do another QA/QC on the file. They'll determine the amount that's the applicant's eligible for. They'll forward that recommendation for approval to the special case panel, which the special case panel is outlined in detail in the policy, the makeup and function of the special case panel with a recommendation to approve. If the duplication benefit exceeds what they're asking for, then they'll be notified they're not eligible. But again, we're going to work with them, let them know if there's anything they can do to be eligible, and let them know if there's any possible benefits from another public service or public assistance agency. And then the final step is getting them paid. And that is a package that will be sent to the special case panel. If the special case panel will meet virtually, we can approve these in batches. If they're approved, they'll be sent over to fiscal, get checks cut, and get that money out to where it needs to be out. And again, for those that need to be reevaluated, we'll reevaluate them every 3 months. If for some reason the special case panel does not approve because they have a question, they need more information, it will be returned back to step 2. And again, that caseworker, that case manager will get a hold of the applicant, work with them to get the special case panel the information they need to approve. The case will remain open until the maximum amount is received, and of course we'll close the file. And that is basically the process. And then Beverly and or Chris will take over the community engagement strategy. So I covered the operations, the nuts and bolts of the operations.
Good afternoon, council members. This is Beverly Harris with the Public Information Office, and I will be joined by Ms. Chris Keefe. The Public Information Office will be working with community government and community services to get information out to the community about the program. We're looking at just four different areas on how we're going to do this. As Mike King has mentioned already, though, what's really great about our public engagement efforts is that so many community organizations already have reached out to us. So they are ready to assist in getting information out about this program. And I think, and I'm sure Ms. Kiefer will agree, that that's probably going to be the most beneficial aspect of our outreach efforts. Go to next. The first thing that public information will be doing, of course, is using our usual platforms for getting information out. Mike King did mention that we're going to utilize the county website. That's one of the first things we want to get up upon approval of this program, is to have a presence on our website so that the community knows where they can go and that they know that this is going to be a link to the actual portal where they can submit those applications. But we want to get that out as soon as possible. If would be really great if we can get that out at least a month out before the program actually kicks off. And again, the other things that we'll be using are our social media platforms, our Engage Richland video, and the weekly newsletter. I run through this, but I would like for Ms. Kiefer to assist with this, because obviously, again, those community partnerships are going to be just so beneficial with this information. And of course, public information will be working with Ms. Kiefer and her team on the information that is provided to the community organizations, but I'll let her talk to this aspect a little more.
Sure. Thanks, Beverly. Government and Community Services we use Constant Contact for targeted emails to specific constituent groups. We have several small distribution lists set up for various purposes. In fact, there's going to be a targeted email going out to folks along Long Green Parkway to let them know about the upcoming public information meeting on March 4th. So I think a couple council people will be included on that, and some staff folks, as well as some community organizations. But that kind of gives you an idea of how we use the targeted emails. We also have a newsletter that goes out on the 1st and the 15th of the month that goes to a broad audience of community partners, and we just ask them to take that information and share it with the people that they work with and their clients to kind of keep the community updated on what's going on. And again, most of the time, we take the messages the PIO puts together and just kind of tweak them and shorten them or extend upon them as needed to meet the constituent needs. I would imagine there's probably going to be some flyers developed for this, and we'll distribute those in electronic format and ask our partners to post those and make them available. I'll let Beverly handle the news media. But we also have partnerships with several state agencies and municipalities. So we'll be using our contacts with those folks to get the word out. And then again, our community organizations, building out a big distribution list of various organizations that work with people who and these are organizations that normally people would turn to when they are having difficulty meeting their rent payments and getting utility assistance. So it's going to be a pretty detailed list, and we're going to ask them to help get the word out as well.
And just touching on the news media, just quickly, we have already been contacted by some media outlets interested, of course, in what Richland County is doing, when the program will start. So like our community partners, the news media is really on waiting to see what we're going to do and willing to assist with getting this information out to their readers and viewers. Some of the other things Ms. Kiefer touched on with the email blast, in addition to the email blast that her department does, there are other things we can do with that. We also can engage Facebook advertising. Advertising on Facebook can be really inexpensive in the grand scheme of things. So it certainly is an avenue that we can use for that. And that just helps to push the message out just farther reach, larger reach on Facebook. And then of course, some of the things that we've used in the past with the Teletown Hall and just having a community meeting on Zoom or through live stream so that residents can get the information that is being presented, get more information, and have the opportunity to ask questions. And I will let Ms. Kiefer talk about the comment situation.
Yeah, we've worked with Comment before. We have a good partnership with them thanks to Transportation Department. So we'll talk to them about maybe getting some signage posted on the buses. I think putting something on the outside of the buses might be a little cost prohibitive, but posting something inside the buses where people can actually, while they're sitting on the bus, see the information and everything would probably be more helpful. So we'll work with them to make that happen as well.
Thank you, Chris. And then also, again, Mike mentioned this is we're looking to have a link on the county website, something prominent there so people see it right away. That will link to, in the meantime, a holding page until the program is up and running. And then obviously that link will go directly to that information where people can submit their applications. So we're just waiting to see when we can get this information up upon approval of the program.
And last but not least is our recommended targeted go live date. And that would be Monday, April 5th of 2021. That would allow us to have everything in place, have the program put together, have the vendor identified that's going to assist us on this. And I know that we'll be doing some pre-operational news releases to let everybody know, because we are getting a lot of inquiries. There is a tremendous amount of interest in this program. So we want to start communicating as soon as we are authorized to do so, and let folks know what's coming, and let folks know what the dates are and when they can and what they can expect. That's all we have at this time. We'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Okay. And my colleagues, any questions?
You know, we have questions.
All right, I see Ms. Barron. Hands up.
So yes, you know, we have
Ms.
plenty,
McBride.
plenty of questions. Not sure where to start, but I will start with, I can't tell you how excited I am about this, this project and the amount of funds that it's going to put out into our community to those who are in need of this. So I'm excited about it. And I'm just gonna hold on my excitement and just ask my questions. And so with that, you made mention that we're looking to go live on April the 5th, having to identify a vendor. So have we announced or put a bid out for a vendor at this point?
I would defer to Assistant County Administrator Ashley Powell on that, if Ashley's on here.
I am. May I be recognized, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please, Ms. Powell.
So I think this gets back to Councilwoman Newton's question as well about how this program would be facilitated. Our current disaster recovery vendor has put forth a task order that sets forth a model for how they could assist the county in doing this program, but there will need to be a policy decision made around that. We could go to RFP on this and select another vendor, but given the timeline that we're up against, that would not be staff's recommendation. So my final act as ACA would be to put forth a recommendation for moving this program forward with the current DR vendor in a hybrid approach that points to some internal staff departments that would support this effort as well. And that will be forthcoming to the committee and full council.
Thank you. So Ms. Powell, with that, with the hybrid model and using some of our staff, county staff, do we know, have we identified an exact number?
So that's what I'm working on this afternoon, Councilwoman Barron. I have done some preliminary analysis of what departments I think should plug in and who I think should be the point of contact in each of those departments, but I would like to touch base with those department directors before solidifying my recommendation and moving that forward, but I am currently working on that.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, may I have a follow-up or two?
Yes, go ahead, please.
So with that, it looks like I would like to hear from the time an applicant makes application to the time an award is made, not necessarily having funds in hand, but an award is made. What is our projected timeline?
I can address that. Again, the onus is going to be on the applicant, but once all the information is in that's needed, probably the biggest amount of time is from the time the applicant files the initial application to the time that all the information is in that we need and a recommendation for payment. That's going to be very variable on the applicant. But we plan on making payments weekly. So for example, if the applicants are approved this week, they'll go to the special case panel and they'll be cut at the first opportunity to cut that check. Our entire focus is to get this money in the hands of the folks that need it as soon as possible.
So given that we're saying as soon as possible, that's kind of wide, that's kind of vague. And I know that a lot of this is contingent upon if we have to go back to the applicant for verification of information and things of that nature. So you know, and it may be that, you know, this is not a question that we can answer at this time. And I'm fine with that. But if we do, as we set forth the model that you presented was very detailed, and I'm very appreciative of the details. So with that, can we say that we're looking that realistically we can say from, you know, 5 to 7 days, 7 to 12 days, or do we even know?
Once the application is verified and recommended for approval, payment should be made within 1 business week.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chair, my last and final question would be to Ms. Harris or Ms. Kiefer, when we look at getting this information out to the community, a lot of the ways in which you are doing so are done digitally. When I think about a large number of my constituents who don't have the technology that most people will assume that everyone has, what are some of they're non-traditional to us now, but they're really our traditional modes of communicating with our citizens to know, okay, that these funds are available. Are we partnering with churches? You know, what are we doing outside of a digital platform?
It's Ms. Barron, that is where the community partnerships really will come in. And again, I'll let Ms. Kiefer speak to that. But again, with public information, designing the information, creating the flyers for distribution, those obviously will be printed for distribution. So the community partnerships are going to be just really huge with this process. And again, I'll let Ms. Kiefer speak more to that, but community partnerships and the news media, I think, are going to be two of the key things to help us get people who are not, as you know, online and have that access. But of course, one of the tools will be the Richland Library that Mike King spoke to earlier.
Thank you.
Yes, and I can add that some of those non-digital community information and resources are often the churches, the schools, and the libraries. And we're already taking steps to make sure that we have those, you know, we're in contact with those organizations and that we make ourselves available to them as needed if they would like us to come out and talk to people.
Thank you so much. That's all for me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I have Ms. McBride, Ms. Newton, and Livingston. And let me say to my colleagues who are not on the committee, please know that you're free to ask questions if you choose to. Ms. McBride.
Mr. Chair, I have too many concerns about the actual implementation. That it's too many. I have too many questions to be addressed right now. So there needs to be another time that I can speak with the administration or whatever about some of the concerns that I have. However, I am concerned. One of the major concerns is the April 5th implementation date, because that does not give us a lot of time until September. And based on prior programs and those implementations, we may not be able, because the first month of April, and possibly based on past experience, April and May may be tied up with getting the kinks out of it. And so I don't know whether that's the earliest time that we can begin, but I do have concerns about waiting a whole month. Many programs have already, in other counties and states, have already started their implementation process. So I would like for us to reconsider that date. And if there's a trial way to do it or whatever, to look at that. I too, like Ms. Barron, has concerns about the PR. We have to do non-traditional PR. And many of the underserved communities never get the information that's needed. And one of the issues we're dealing with COVID-19 testing is that those people who need to get tested, we're not getting the information to them. So we cannot depend on websites and those things to get that information out to them. And there has to be a means of getting into the community. And the last one would be the landlords and the programs. I remember our other programs and some of the federal programs, they use the banks. So the banks already had the reputation. And so those people who had a relationship to the banks got those resources with businesses. Those landlords that are larger and all will know how to work the process. So I think we have to be very careful in terms of making sure that how we get the information out to the other landlords and all, when those few with big landlords and those that have monopolies don't overtake the program. But anyway, I would like to, and as we've talked before, I know I will be working close with Ms. Barron and the administrator, as well as the committee, and trying to work through with council. The last part, I am concerned about who we're going to get to implement this program. I have concerns there, and making sure that we include maybe some of the people that help with our last COVID-19 program, maybe that they are already in place and could help. Those are just some of the concerns, but overall, I am very pleased with the directions coming from the federal government regarding the requirements. And if we can implement those, I think we'll be on our way to good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have Ms. Newton and then Livingston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my colleagues for asking some of my questions, and to staff for addressing those. Just a few quick questions that I have looking at my list. First, since we just talked about it, for community partners, I would presume, well, let me ask it as a question. Have we already been in contact with those organizations who are most frequently asked for this type of assistance? For example, United Way 211, Cooperative Ministries, those are the go-to whenever people want rental assistance. Have we spoken with them already?
Ms. Newton, this is Chris Kiefer. I have not spoken to them directly yet because it might have been a little premature to do so, sure, but they are on my list of people to contact.
Sure, and I know someone had mentioned that organizations were reaching out already, and so I didn't know if those were some of those. So then just also want to verify, it appears to me, the way that I understood this presentation, that while there are guidelines from the government that they want us to use, most of the policies and parameters will be customized by us. So we have a lot of latitude in terms of how we are shaping our requirements. Is that correct?
Well, actually, ma'am, the policies and procedures were designed to exactly reflect the requirements of the statute. However, the guidance from the Treasury does give us some, I guess it puts the onus on us in areas such as self-certification and areas such as that. So that's why we have to do as much validation as we can. But really everything we talked about is based and reflects federal statute or the guidance provided by Treasury. We did not add anything. We did not subtract anything from that. Okay, there were just many areas where you were saying that they were extremely flexible on this or extremely flexible on that. It gave me the impression that obviously we're going to follow the federal guidelines. So I would never imply that we weren't, but it seemed to me originally that we might have had a lot of latitude in terms of how exactly we were choosing to disperse the funds. But if I'm mistaken, that's fine. And I can touch base with somebody offline to clarify that. Yeah, the dispersal of the funds are based, but we do have the Treasury Department recommends flexibility, especially in the areas where folks cannot come up with the documentation, that we utilize as much flexibility as possible to assist. Great. And then last question, just for my information, does the City of Columbia have a similar funding and a similar program that they will be starting? No, ma'am, they did not qualify. They did not have the population base to be able to qualify to be able to apply. Okay, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I have Livingston and Malnowski. My questions are probably kind of a quick yes or no. Many of them, because the others have been asked already. Now, a person can receive assistance for utility and rent.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Does that require separate applications?
Well, actually, yes, it would. It depends on now if there would be the case where utilities is part of the rental agreement, then that would be one application. A lot of times in apartments, it includes utilities. So that would be on one application. But for example, we might have applications from Richland County Utilities. We may have applications come in from the City of Columbia Utilities. There may be applications come in from Dominion Power, etc. It does provide for payment of priority payment arrears of utilities and rent.
Will individuals be allowed to be paid retroactive rent payments?
We can pay arrears, rental and utilities back to March 20th of 2020. That's the presidential declaration of the COVID emergency. So yes, the arrears can go back to March 20th of 2020.
think that was important because when you start the program, if you could do something in the rears, that would help if you had to start at a later date or something.
Yeah, that's our concern, is to make sure, because the folks that are in serious arrears are the ones that face the greatest potential of eviction and or utility shutoff.
And my last question, I think you just answered one of the ones that I think you just answered. I want to make sure. No municipalities receive funds unless they had a certain population. And
Yes,
no municipality in Richland County had a large enough population to receive funds.
that is correct. In Richland County is the only local jurisdiction that had the population level to apply for these funds.
Thank you. Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. McBride already did cover what my concern was, but I just want to echo that again, and that I do not want to see the larger landlords possibly get the bulk of these funds to the exclusion of the individual resident paying rent to someone. And so I want to make sure that we do have a very fair distribution that makes sure enough individuals benefit also. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McBride, your hand up again, or you did take it down?
Well, actually, it wasn't up, but I do have one final question. I forgot to take it down from last time.
And then Ms. Barron.
How much money will go into administration?
Maximum is 10% of the grant allotment.
So that's what, 1.2 million, something like that?
1.25 million maximum. We are going to do everything in our power to minimize administrative costs with a focus on maximizing the dollars for our residents in need.
Well, I guess one thing is that a weakness before is that we tried to use our existing staff, and they're already overworked, many are, and some of them may not be their area of expertise. So I think that in order to make sure that we don't lose money by September, that we use as much possible as needed to get out the resources and to hire the people or whatever to be the caseworkers or what we need to do to get the program implemented. Because I fear that we cannot depend on staff given the shortage that we have.
Mr. Chair, may I be recognized?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Vice Chair McBride, you're correct. And that is the reason for the hybrid approach that I'll be recommending to council. I did understand you earlier to say that you had some concerns about the implementation. So if you are amenable to this, I would like to give you a call tomorrow and take down your concerns and provide a written response to the full council. Any other member of council who has concerns or questions they would like answered in the same format, if you would let me know when's a good time to talk to you or send those to me via email, I will include that in my recommendation to council.
Thank you. Mr. Malinowski. I'm sorry, Mr. Malinowski, did you speak? You did. Ms. Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. McBride and I were, I guess we're all in the same vein. And I was even going to offer a suggestion of temporary agencies when it comes to implementing this program. It's extremely imperative that we get these funds out to the community as quickly as possible and not wait. So I just want to say that one more time to please, let's do it every part that we can, because we know where our staff are, and I'm sure the ACA Powell is going to get a great assessment on what can and cannot be done. But I would not like to see our staff to be, stretched any further, if at all possible. And it does also lend to the community to provide other job opportunities for those who may be in need. Secondly, as we talk about making sure that local landlords have the opportunity to these funds, I would just encourage going, as we look at our community outreach, as we did with the drive-through registration for the vaccine, we may want to look at something as well going within the community to go where the people are to help them through this process, because there will be some landlords who, they're not going to want to walk through the paperwork. And I hope that our application process will not be so convoluted as the the registering for the vaccine, but it is one of which that people can move through quite quickly and understand. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, you recognize.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, Mr. Chair and members of council on the committee, to your point about staff and getting the services out to the citizens that are in need, I would just ask that you strongly consider the recommendation that we're going to make, because not only is the staffing part important, but the documentation key is really important. We were talking about federal dollars, not Richland County dollars. And so as you think about using other organizations within Richland County, you have to also consider that now what you're asking them to do is to make sure they are compliant with federal guidelines on behalf of Richland County, even though Richland County will be responsible if someone inadvertently takes a misstep. So I don't want to necessarily portion this out to multiple agencies, because I think you opened up yourself for exposure with potentially inconsistent documentation and inconsistent processes that ultimately Richland County would be responsible for those federal dollars. So just please consider that as you think through the recommendations that we're going to make. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I think we may be ready to move to that next item on the agenda. Then no further comments
Oh, wow.
or questions.
Mr. Chair, just a really quick question.
Yes.
Obviously, action is going to be imperative, and there are policy decisions that council will have to make. When will that come before us, and will whatever those recommendations are have to get to council through this committee? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
I believe they would, and I can certainly have some staff who's gone through this process more than I have, but I believe this would have to go through this committee, which is ideally why we wanted the information to first happen now, have time to present again in March, so we can go through the council, and then with an approval happening sometime in March, which will allow us to be able to stand up this program as early as April.
Thank you.
Okay, again, that brings us to item 6 on the agenda. And item 6 is COVID relief disaster recovery funds. Mr. Brown.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, members of council in this committee. What I simply wanted to do was just take a brief moment to bring the members who are not familiar with the action that council previously took related to COVID disaster recovery funds. For those who have not been a part of this process, the council had allocated funding from its disaster recovery funds to be used for COVID-19 relief. They did that last year as a part of the pandemic process. During those conversations, one of the things that council did was to give the administrator the ability to use those funds as necessary to support the operations related to COVID-19 relief. Since that time, we've tried to apply for grants to deal with certain issues within the county where agencies have needed funds specifically to take care of COVID-19, for example, using petitions in the magistrates' facilities. And part of that, Mr. Chair, members of council, is that some of those grants, you have to have started doing that stuff beginning in 2021. Well, obviously for us, that's too late. There are steps we already took to try to mitigate COVID issues. So we have departments with bills that we need to try to accommodate. And so what I'm specifically asking for is for this committee to allow the county administrator to use those funds that were associated with COVID-19 relief to pay for those items that the county has needs of to support those agencies who have bought products and put up petitions and those types of things, who don't have a line item to afford those things in their current budgets. So right now, for example, we have at least one invoice that I believe is around somewhere between maybe $120,000 and $150,000 for services related to petitions that we don't have separate funding to deal with. So I'm asking the council to allow me to use some of those funds to take care of those types of invoices, because those departments don't have that within their line items to take care of.
Now, let me ask my colleague, in question for clarification, what Mr. Brown is asking?
Yes.
Ms. McBride?
Yes, Mr. Brown, are you telling me that you're talking about governmental departments
That is correct.
and the funds that we provided were for constituents, were for our citizens? And so we did not expend those funds?
You
Is
would,
that what you're telling me?
there were quite a bit of those funds that were expended, I think to the tune of, I don't have the exact numbers right now, Mr. Hayes can tell us, but I know well over $1 million was expended related to those funds. But there are some funds that have not been expended. Yes, ma'am, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, and that's my concern now, because the need was so great that every penny should have been spent going to the constituents plus more. And so I don't want to get bogged down because the process, we had some problems with the implementation. We voted for those funds to go to the people that were in need, not to departments. So I have some real concerns about those funds not getting to constituents. And I know they didn't get to some of them because I had all types of complaints and calls calling, saying that they couldn't get through, that the process was convoluted, complex. So I have some concerns with that myself. Thank you.
Chair Livingston, may I be recognized, please?
Hayes, you're recognized.
Yes, to address Ms. McBride and Mr. Brown's question, that's correct. Of course, the council voted for $250,000 to go to senior resources, which that $250,000, of course, was fully expended. Besides that, the council voted for a grants program totaling $750,000. $250,000 was for nonprofits, $500,000 was for small businesses. To this date, of the $750,000, $694,000 of that was expended. So that's roughly 93% of those funds of the $750,000 was expended. A lot of the delay, as we have mentioned to council before, had to do with the program being very new and a lot of grantees having trouble becoming compliant. My staff worked diligently and hard to work with those groups to get as many qualified as possible so that we fully expended those funds according to grant guidelines. But again, to recap, $250,000 was expended to senior resources, and of the $750,000 that was for the grants program for small business and nonprofits, approximately $694,000 has been expended, which is 93%. The amounts that Mr. Brown is referring to is the funds that were outside of the grants program that is available for council to redirect if should they choose to. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I need to respond to Mr. Hayes.
You recognize.
I don't want you to think by any means that I don't appreciate the hard work of your staff and others. In fact, I'm the one that said that they had too much work to do and it was not enough support. So let me clarify that to make sure that you understand it and staff understand that their work is appreciated. And I realize that they were overworked. There's still confusion about the $250,000 that went to directly to constituents and the other money going to the businesses. But regardless to the amount, that was not enough funds in the beginning. And I'm still concerned that those funds did not get out. And I only mention it because to emphasize my concerns about getting this money out.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. McBride. And so for us, there are two things I'm trying to accomplish right now. One is to allow you to be aware of the funding that is still available, and two, to communicate that that funding need on two respects. One, there are several resources that are available, that are being made available to citizens that are not necessarily available to the county government organization. And with that being the case, we do have some initiatives that have been put in place that the county has to address in some shape, form, or fashion. Right now, in terms of COVID-19 disaster recovery funds, that is the only line item that the county has where they've set aside any money related to COVID-19 relief. So separate and apart from that, I may have to come to council on a separate issue and say, we have some outstanding invoices that we need to address through some other amendments. So this is an opportunity not to do that, but certainly that may be something that we have to do. but I understand your point.
Okay, because therefore I won't need to repeat it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Newton and Ms. Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do believe that Ms. Barron had her hand raised before me. No, you didn't.
No, let's see.
So first, before I ask my questions, Mr. Brown, am I to understand that you feel that you need a council action on this at this meeting today?
I don't need it today, but we do have invoices, and so we're going to have to address that, but no, ma'am. But I wanted to bring that up today so that going down, at least by the next meeting, you all have had a chance to consider that, and I will need some decision point between now and the next meeting.
Okay, so what I think I will do, because I've heard answers addressing different buckets, is unfortunately, I'm still a little bit unclear on buckets of funding and what they were originally intended for. And so what I want to make sure that I understand is if we use the funds that you are discussing, what are we repurposing from? So were they previously designated for something specific that didn't get it? And I heard Mr. Hayes's comment about the constituent funds where we expended 93%, but it appears that there are other sources. So what I think I'm going to do, if you don't require a council action this very day, is I'm just going to defer those questions so that I can get answers later. But I do have questions about that. Additionally, I think it would be helpful for me and maybe other members of the body if we could have some sort of general projections in terms of the types of expenditures that you are expecting to bring to us related to COVID. So you mentioned you have some invoices now, but you're going to have to come to us down the line. And so I know that accounting process is happening, but it would be helpful to me to know, are we talking about $100,000? Are we talking about $55 million, to be absurd? I'm trying to figure out what we're going to have to adjust for. And to the extent that you could provide some visibility to that, that would be helpful. So those are my general areas of questions. And I'm happy to come back separately so I can get clarification, because I feel like I might need a lot. Thank you,
Yes,
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I'll just say briefly, real briefly here.
Yeah, good.
That's why we're coming to you about this, is because the funding that we applied for, when they came back to us, they said, you have to have used these funds starting January 1 of 2021. And as you can imagine, we've been dealing with the information before January 1, 2021. And so that's created some of the necessity that we did not know would be required at the time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Barron?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so lots of my concern is in line with Ms. Newton. But with those funds, and I'll start where you left off, Mr. Brown, those funds that had to be expended starting in January of 2021, those also, or let me ask it this way, the invoices that we're needing to be paid meets in that category?
No, ma'am, the invoices, the work for the mitigation was done in 2020. The grant fund that we were approved for, that we hope to cover these items, said that the beginning period is January 1, 2021. So previous items cannot be paid for with that funding source.
And so we do have other items that we can use for the new grant funds starting January 2021.
Unfortunately, these items were specific to the group that they were in. This particular, we're talking about right now, the judicial system. They were specific from a specific pot of funds that could be applied for by that specific group. And so right now, they've already done that work associated with those funds in 2020. So that could add to that same work, because it's not there to be done.
Okay, so those funds for this year, are we sending them back to the entity, or what are we doing with those funds since we've been awarded them?
unless we can get another qualified project within that particular jurisdiction, then those funds will not be able to be used by Richland County.
Okay, and if I may, one last question, because when we received the presentation or the information that Ms. Newton has requested, a lot of my questions will be answered, but I would like to know what was the total amount for this project that we're talking about, our COVID relief disaster funds? What was that total budget?
I believe that the total amount, and Director Hayes, please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was around 1.5 with 500,000 going towards PPE for our emergency first responders. And then the rest of the money being apportioned out through those nonprofit agencies that we just discussed, directly with senior resources, and then through the other programs that was set up with the relief grant, small business, and then nonprofits.
Okay, and I promise my last question, and that is, when we awarded grants to the nonprofits and the businesses, did we do just one round or did we do 2 rounds?
Mr. Hayes,
Chair Livingston,
go ahead, Mr. Hayes.
no, wait here, just to verify, that total amount that council did approve last spring was actually 1.9 million. And of that, 1 million was for grants associated. Again, 250 went directly for senior needs. The other 750,000 went for small businesses and nonprofits. And to answer your question, there were several different, I want to say there were like 5 rounds, I think, for the grants program. If I'm not mistaken, I think there were 5 rounds.
But you would have to understand what a round is.
So it is not in the traditional sense, obviously, as it relates to grants funding. So if you wouldn't mind, explain what a round is.
Well, what I'll do, if Ms. Myers, she or Myers probably could, if she's on the phone, she probably can, I know she worked closely with my staff on that. She may be, but I certainly can get you the answer if she's not online.
Oh, and that is absolutely fine. You can get it to me offline. I just for future, I would like to, so that I don't use my terminology that I bring in, and then assume that I'm thinking a round is one thing and it's another. So please, you can email that to me. We don't have to belabor the hour any further. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'll get you that, ma'am. Sure. Thank you.
Any further questions? And Mr. Brown, this is not an item. Is this an item you do not need action on this item?
No, sir. I just wanted to open up the discussion, and no, sir.
Thank you.
For action today.
Okay. With no other question on this item, that brings us to item 7, which is resuming limited in-person service.
Yes, sir. Again, this is another item that I know that there had been general questions about. I broached the subject a little bit last year at the end of the year, talked about looking at offering some limited in-person services early in the new year, depending on what was happening with the pandemic. I know there are questions from the council, so I wanted to open up the opportunity to have those questions asked and answered potentially. But I will tell you that one of the things that we have done is that the staff did acquire a program which will allow for appointments. The IT department has been working with several agencies that we know require a certain level of in-person services. They have made headway in verifying that those program partners are up and running with the information that they need to use that program. And so we are looking to implement some of those things. But again, I wanted to open this up for the council members to have a discussion about questions that they had or information they want to share concerning in-person services.
Okay, Ms. Newton, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Brown. First, let me say thank you to you and the staff for all of the work that you've been doing since the start of the pandemic. I know that in February 2020, I was not expecting anything that happened after February of 2020. So thank you, and thank you for your commitment to keeping our staff and our constituents safe. So I'm going to preface this by saying, I'm presuming that the same commitment to safety that we have for constituents and staff is still there. So with that in mind, do we have a tentative and or phased reopening plan that you are currently considering that you might be in a position to share with council. And I will just say that, you know, wanting to do everything safely, if people who know me know I love Target, but if Target doesn't have something that I want, I can go to Publix or I can go to Walmart or I can go any number of stores. But if I need to pay my property taxes or if I need to register a deed, I pretty much have to handle that at the county. And so I am very concerned about us getting to a point where we are offering more services to our constituents, particularly to some of those constituents who might not be as internet savvy. I recently had an experience at the Department of Motor Vehicles, and let me just say, it was extraordinarily pleasant, quick, and efficient, and I felt safe while I was there. And I was sitting there thinking, oh my word, if the DMV can do this, surely we can find a way where we can also do this at the county. So I'm very interested, again, keeping our staff, keeping our constituents safe, in understanding what this is going to look like. And to the extent that we have a plan that's already been developed, even if it's only in draft form, that would be something that I would be very interested in taking a look at. So thank you.
Thank you. And yes, ma'am. And I'll, you know, offer you at this point some of the verbal cues, you know, of what we've been looking at in terms of reopening, if you will, to more in-person services. And I'm glad you said it that way, because I want to remind individuals that we do have limited in-person services that are taking place now in various departments. But to your point, one of the things that we want to do is we do recognize that we have individuals in our community who don't have the necessary internet connectivity. One of the conversations that we've had internally with our teams is that because we are Richland County and you can't go somewhere else to get this done, and because we know we have documented internet connectivity issues in our community, we're going to have to get to a level of in-person services because of that reason. So to your point, Ms. Newton, we have folks on both sides of that conversation who are, some are thrilled about that opportunity and some are concerned about that opportunity to engage with more people in the county's facilities. I would say my expectation at this point in time is that we will go to those departments, and not to call anybody out, but I'll just tell you some of those general departments where people request in-person services. So we're talking about the auditor's office, talking about the treasurer's office, for example. We're working with those offices through our IT department with that appointment system. So we look to have conversations with those individuals here at the beginning of next week to determine whether or not we can get the green light for those agencies. And then we'll continue to do that for all of the agencies, Ms. Newton, that have already approved that the software program is how they think it should be, so they can begin to implement that. So literally, I expect that we'll go down each of those departments that have been identified by IT as having approved that program for usage for that department to find out if they are ready to get the green light to go forward. I will tell you verbally, the auditor and the treasurer in particular have committed that they believe that they have their staffs ready, and that when I speak with them and we agree on that green light, that they'll be ready to move forward. So that's really the plan. And so what I'll be able to do is I'll commit to this group to get you those departments where we have gone through that in-person service process with the booking appointment system, and then try to give you a timeline and a schedule of here's when they say they're gonna be ready to go, here's when they say they're gonna be ready to go. And that's how we'll plan to open up for more services, Ms. Newton, with that process.
Certainly. Mr. Chair, may I do a quick follow-up on that?
Okay, go ahead, please.
Very quickly. As part of that information, it would also be helpful for me if you could, you're saying these are the people we've talked to and they're on board. If you could also say these are kind of other departments where people have a high demand for in-person services, and this is the level of in-person services that we're currently providing. So let me just make this up. It could be the basket weaving department that's not ready to go and do the appointment system, but there's a high demand there and they're only able to do one in-person appointment a week, hypothetically, for me to have a picture, not just of who is ready to move forward, but what remains and where they are in terms of the constituent needs to meet with them. Does that make sense, Mr. Brown?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I have Ms. McBride, Ms. Malinowski, Ms. Barron, and then Livingston.
Mr. Chair, I think Ms. Newton addressed some of the questions I had, but Mr. Brown, I think that we've done a great job with continuing some of the services, even though all of them are not in person. And one area of concern, and I don't know how it fits in, and I know you've got numerous emails, as many of us, regarding the litter issue and how we're going to, and not now, but I just want to throw it out for you to think about how we're going to address that problem. And I guess, Mr. Chair, this is for you, because as we begin to look at resuming in-person services, what is the position of the council in our virtual meetings? Do we continue those and then have in-person services, or how are we going to make those two somewhat compatible?
I plan to make that an agenda item for council discussion, so council members can give feedback in terms of where they are with that and what they desire.
Thank you.
Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When the last presentation was being given by Mr. King, he made a comment that said that they wanted to have somebody be able to talk to someone within the county when they called up. It would be nice if that was the service that the county was giving on a daily basis right now. I get a lot of calls and emails from individuals, and it's not that the county, granted, many of them are complaining about the county not being open, but they're not getting return calls. They don't know where their applications stand. They don't know maybe what they can do. There appears to be an extraordinary amount of time taken for some of the matters that residents are asking of county departments. They don't get callbacks or contacts back, frustrating them a great deal. I've got one gentleman that just called me this afternoon, and he said he put in a business license application for his small business a month ago, and he's yet to hear anything from the people in the business licensing. To me, that's an extraordinary amount of time. I think I realize when people aren't working right there in the county building, they may not be devoting 100% of their time to county work during the workday, but we need to do a better job of responding to individuals. We need to do a better job of responding when phone messages are left. Doesn't seem like it's that difficult of a job to do. We had those problems when they were there full time, and now they're being exacerbated by not being there full time. So I really would like to see a lot of improvement in the response time to our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Ms. Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Brown, I guess today is my day to be excited and do my happy dance, because I am ready for us to start to come together at some point to be able to move forward with serving the citizens in Richland County in a limited face-to-face capacity. Just like Mr. Malinowski said, one of which that I would love to see us add as a priority to the online appointments would be the business service office, who handles the license. I hear that an awful lot, and I would like to hope that they would be included. Just two quick questions maybe three, and they all can be rolled in here together. And that is a target date that we will start these services, and if we will do a walkthrough or a dry run of what this looks like before unrolling it, so that we kind of anticipate what will happen when we do open these services up, and kind of have an idea about a what if this happens, then you do this. And then my last question would be, is there a telephone line that if I do not have access to make an online appointment, can I still get my same services that I would if I would call in, but as we've been doing over the last year?
Yes, ma'am. And that's one of the things that, as we talked about the appointment system, is talking with the departments about, we know there are individuals who are not going to be able to go online for whatever number of reasons. So how can they then get their appointment set for them? So when they call your office or when they call the ombudsman's office, the triggers that allow those appointments to be set on behalf of those constituents who are unable to do that on their own. Also, to your point about a walkthrough, there are two things I'd like to just bring up here briefly. One is we have citizens that come to the county every day still. I know that people are not aware sometimes and they think that the county is closed. But again, I would say to you that the county itself is not closed. So we have a number of individuals that come to the building every day. And so what we anticipate is that we will also have people who will come here, who will walk in, who may not have an appointment. And to the student's point at the DMV, and I've been there during the pandemic process, is they are able to work you in as long as those individuals, are patient. So we anticipate that there may be someone who shows up who does not have an appointment, and the goal would be to still allow them to be able to come in, but at the same time to keep the level of distancing and those areas of concern addressed. So the only concern I have, Ms. Barron, that we have not answered is what happens if you have 35 people lined up outside at the door at one time, and as they're trying to come in for those services. So trying to figure out, whether or not we're going to ask those individuals, for example, to, space out outside, or if the weather's not good, in their vehicles, those types of things we have not identified exactly how to address those. But that is my biggest concern, is whether we house individuals, a lot show up at one time without appointments, who are not expected to be in the county's facilities. But I think, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm kind of rambling, I apologize. But what I think, Ms. Barron, is that going forward, once we start the limited in-person services, hopefully two things will happen. Hopefully staff will feel comfortable in that there are potentially no incidences that occur. And hopefully two, there will be no incidences with citizens that are coming in. Because I'd also, even though it's not all about, the look, I don't want to be turned around and say Richland County, creates unsafe environment by doing, beginning to allow people to come in. I know people are doing it all across the state, but again, I know sometimes that the way things are handled certainly make a difference. So with those two things happening, I think we can ramp things up quickly beyond just appointments. But we're going to start with appointments.
And I know I asked you a lot of questions at once. And so to my last question was, do we have a target date that we're hoping that we can start this or unroll this at some point?
Yeah, I'm hoping to start some of the offices that have communicated that they are ready for that, to us to get together, hopefully here in actually mid-March.
Great.
Hoping that those appointments that have already been approved, that we can start those particular programs here in mid-March.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I have Livingston, then McBride. Mr. Brown, is the courthouse currently open to provide services to citizens on an in-person basis?
The courthouse itself, sir, has gone through various changes. I can't tell you whether or not they're open consistently or not. I can say that our department within the courthouse, Register of Deeds office, is open and providing services by appointment at the Register of Deeds office. But we get information from the courthouse as needed that sometimes they are closed because of incidences that occur. But I'm not quite sure, so I can't speak definitively about that.
So if I'm, let's say, for example, I'm an abstractor, I need access to some kind of real estate, clothing, whatever related to real estate. How do I get that information? And I need transcript, or hard documentation, so forth. How do I get that?
Yes, sir. I have Director Warner on the call. I will tell you that right now there's, I believe, two ways to do that. There is, for whatever you don't have access to electronically, that you can set up an appointment. That there's an email process to do that, and there's a phone number as well with the Register of Deeds office that will allow you to communicate with someone to get an appointment to see to those needs. But you can go to the Register of Deeds office to do those things.
Now, is that a limited appointment? Because that's one of the areas I'm getting several complaints about, because I'm being told, of course, you know, I don't know, that the appointments are set up, and there are times when there's not enough time to complete what you need to do with the time frame for the appointment. There are times there are confusions about the appointment and so forth. So I'm just concerned about making sure that whatever we're doing those appointments, it's working the way it ought to work to help meet the needs of that constituent.
Yes, sir. I did hear early on, early into the pandemic, and a few months thereafter, that there were those type of concerns, Mr. Livingston, and I got several calls from quite a few people. I have actually not heard that recently. I saw an email that came through related to that. But if you read that email a little bit, some of it talks about the actual appointment was able to be scheduled. So I'm not quite sure, but I will still check into that. But again, that was something we heard early on, not so much here in the last few months from any number of consistency, sir.
Thank you. Ms. McBride, then Ms. Newton.
Mr. Livingston, it's my understanding that the courthouse, the administrative part of the courthouse, has been open for quite some time now. Most of the staff back there are full-time.
But my concern was, if I want to go walk in the courthouse, I can't just go walk in the courthouse. It's part of my question.
Well, I'm not sure. I know that they have staff that's full-time now. Most of the staff are back working full-time. So I'm not sure. I'm assuming they could, but I can't answer that.
Do you know the answer to that, Mr. Brown? Whether or not, if I was going to want to go walk in the courthouse right now, can I do that?
Mr. Livingston, I don't want to misspeak, so I'm going to say no, I can't answer that question right now, but I can get that answer for you.
All right, thank you.
No, it's after 5.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Mr. McBride, were you through?
Oh, no, I was just, because it is after 5.
Ms. Newton?
Thank you. And thank you guys for acknowledging the time, which I'm usually flexible on, but do have to pick up a child from track who will wonder where his mother is. Very quickly, Mr. Brown, you would, can you run home? Mr. Brown, you addressed some information that you were going to follow up with us on. We might have been a little parallel with some things. I absolutely want that information, but whatever plans and draft plans that you have regarding opening and a soft reopening, just want to be clear, I'd appreciate seeing that as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, Mr. Chair, colleagues.
Thank you. Any other questions about item 7 in terms of resuming limited in-person services? If not, the next item on our agenda is adjournment. And Mr. Brown, you don't need any action regarding that item either, correct?
No, sir, I do not need any action, Mr. Chair.
Move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn is been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly second for adjournment. It is only, can you call the roll for the motion to adjourn?
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Meeting's adjourned. Y'all have a great evening.